tonight in particular, because in the past 2 hours there has been 200 murders by the Assad regime. 200 civilians have been killed, 500 have been injured. The Assad regime is now using artillery shells to plummet, to bomb civilian buildings. So what was intolerable before, what was outrageous before, which is shooting with sniper fire and so on against civilians, now the Assad regime is using artillery. And so to show our outrage, we have come here, though it is late, though it is cold, just to demonstrate our outrage against this massacre.
So, as a member of the Syrian National Council, what do you hope to accomplish, through this conflict?
We want to mobilize public opinion. We want to mobilize international public opinion as to the fact that this is an unarmed civilian uprising against 48 years of dictatorship, that Syrians will no longer tolerate this, and that we want to cause the collapse of the regime. We want Assad to be tried by a court of law for crimes against humanity. And so here in Washington, this is our small contribution to trying to mobilize American public opinion.
So with what has happened with Russia today in the UN Security Council, what do you think of what has gone on in the UN and Russia's response to this?
Russia is complicit to murder. Russia is supporting the murder of Syrian civilians, and this is only for the protection of Russia's self-interests. It does not give a damn about human life, Syrians in particular. And we say to Russia, of course the foreign minister of Russia has said that a change of regime in Syria for him is unacceptable, that we frankly do not give a damn what he thinks is acceptable or not. It is Syrians who will decide their destiny, not Russia. And again, Russia and its leadership are complicit to the murder of innocent, unarmed civilians.
And if you could go to Obama, less than 2 miles from here, sleeping in the White House tonight, what would you tell him?
I would thank him for all the support that he has given the Syrian people. The United States has stood by the Syrian people. The United States is pushing in the Security Council for resolutions that would condemn the Assad regime. We would like to see from the United States, obviously, more support because civilians are dying right now, and they have absolutely no shelter, no help, so they need to be protected.
And if Russia ultimately kills everything that the UN is doing right now, what do you expect the international response to be, from countries like the United States and Qatar, who have spoken out against Assad's crackdown?
Well, when we call for an international intervention, it's not a military intervention, it's not a NATO-like intervention against Libya, but it is one that safeguards the Syrian civilians, the one that gives them protection. It is the obligation of the international community to protect civilians that are under fire.
And in an ideal world, how would you see the conflict resolving itself at this point?
At this point, with the collapse of the Assad regime and hopefully his capture and his trial by a court of law, again for crimes against humanity, and for the establishment and the emergence of a free and a democratic Syria.
Okay. And how do you think that will be accomplished?
This is going to be accomplished by the collapse of the regime, and the opposition has already put together a coalition of forces under the umbrella of the Syrian National Council, which will manage the state in an interim period, a transitional period towards democracy, in which political parties can form and in which they can compete in a parliament.
And how do you plan to reach that transitional period?
We are doing everything we can to cause the collapse of the Assad regime. Thus far, there are many states that have imposed economic and diplomatic sanctions, that have imposed sanctions against Syria. And in Syria, of course, there is the emergence of the defecting soldiers from the army that are now beginning to protect the civilians.
So, I've heard that there's a large percentage of the Syrian people that still support the regime.
That's not true.
It's false.
It's false. a large number of Syrian people want the collapse of the regime. There certainly are supporters of the regime, and these are the cronies, those who have vested interests in the upper echelons of the business elite, a very corrupt business elite that has been in cahoots with the Assad regime, or put differently, that the Assad regime created. And so the proportion of Syrians that want to collapse the collapse of the Assad regime, I think, are a overwhelming majority.
Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, I'm assuming you would like the regime to be replaced with a democracy.
Yes.
But in that democracy, what type of political parties do you think will emerge in a post-Assad Syria?
The political parties that would be established by the people themselves. And so you have a wide array of political parties from the far left to the far right. Mm-hmm. And it is up to the Syrian people to decide which political parties they want and which political parties to represent them in parliament, and for them ultimately to decide what their government looks like.